The first time I drove through the colossal wrought iron gates of the Sterling estate, nestled deep within the most secluded, ivy-covered corner of Greenwich, Connecticut, I felt a physical shift in the atmosphere. It was as if I were crossing a border into a sovereign nation governed by different laws of physics. My sensible, scuffed flats clicked with an embarrassing timidity against the checkerboard marble of the grand foyer, a sharp, rhythmic intrusion into the cathedral-like silence of that house. The air smelled of old money, lemon polish, and something colder, like unheated stone. But before I take you further into that hallway, if you enjoy true stories that push the boundaries of the human heart and explore the gray areas of morality, we desperately need your support. Please help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button right now, turn on the notification bell, and I'd love to know where in the world you are watching from. Drop it in the comments below. I accepted the nanny position under the naive impression that it would be a peaceful interlude in my chaotic life, an honest, quiet way to pay for my final semesters of nursing school and build that nest egg I was so meticulously planning. My only responsibility, on paper at least, was to care for baby Leo, a newborn with wide, inquisitive eyes, while his mother, Eleanor, returned to her cutthroat schedule as a senior partner at a high-stakes Manhattan law firm. I was only 20 years old. My name is Hannah. Back then, I was what the older ladies at my church would call a good girl. I was raised in the Bible Belt, brought up under strict doctrine, with a silver cross always resting in the hollow of my throat, and a worldview painted in stark absolutes of black and white. My most precious treasure, or at least, that's what society, my pastor, and my mother had convinced me of, was my virtue. I guarded my innocence with a zealotry that bordered on obsession, saving myself for Ethan, my high school sweetheart. Ethan was the golden boy, a pre-med student with a gentle smile, the kind of guy with whom I dreamed of walking down the aisle in a dress of blinding white. He respected my boundaries, my anxieties, and that unspoken covenant that our first time would be sanctified by marriage vows. But before we wade into the murky, turbulent waters of this confession, I need to hit pause. If you are the kind of person who believes that real stories, the ones that dive into the abyss of human desire and the contradictions of the soul, deserve to be heard, I need your backing. We are agonizingly close to our subscriber goal. I invite you to subscribe right this second and ring that bell. It's a small gesture for you, but it means the absolute world to us. Also, I'd love to read your thoughts. Tell me in the comments which city or state you're following this story from. It fascinates me to see how far my voice travels. Returning to that house, from day one, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. It wasn't because of the baby. Leo was an absolute cherub. It wasn't Eleanor, who was polite in a frosty, distant way, perpetually glued to her BlackBerry. The source of my disturbance had a name and a presence. Julian Sterling. Julian, Eleanor's husband, was the kind of man who sucked the oxygen out of a room just by standing in the doorway. He possessed that effortless, negligent elegance of a man who has known nothing but wealth and power since birth. He was older, perhaps in his late 30s, with graying temples that only added to his allure. At first, I tried to rationalize it. I told myself my discomfort was just my own insecurity, the provincial shyness of a scholarship girl facing a master of the universe. But the way he looked at me, it wasn't the way an employer looks at the help. It was a gaze with physical weight, heavy and charged, tracing the silhouette of my body as if his eyes had fingertips. I felt stripped, exposed, touched without a single physical contact ever occurring. I tried to ignore it, burying my nervousness under the routine of bottle warming and stroller walks through the manicured gardens. But every time our eyes met by accident, my heart would trample against my ribs like a frightened bird. I had absolutely no idea, in my naive 20-year-old brain, how far that undertow would drag me. And it is precisely that fall, slow, inevitable, and dizzying, that I am going to confess to you today. By the second day, denial was no longer a luxury I could afford. I realized his behavior wasn't a product of an overactive imagination. Julian always found some implausible excuse to cut through the living room, right when I was rocking the baby to sleep, or to wander into the kitchen for a glass of tap water he never drank, just to observe me from a closer proximity. I felt uncomfortable, yes, like prey sensing a predator in the tall grass. But And this is the hardest part to admit. At the same time, a dark seed of curiosity began to germinate in the soil of my repression. It was like being trapped in a silent chess match where I didn't know the rules, yet I was mesmerized by the movement of the pieces. I thought of Ethan, of his wholesome laugh, of the promise I had made to myself and to God to arrive at our wedding intact. I repeated his name in my mind like a protective mantra. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. But the mantra lost its potency against the electric shiver that zipped down my spine whenever Julian invaded my personal space. Even the sound of his breathing, steady and low, triggered a biological alarm in my nervous system, a toxic cocktail of fear and anticipation. Everything shifted on a Tuesday afternoon. A nor'easter had rolled in, turning the sky a bruised purple and plunging the house into that elegant, moody gloom of a stormy afternoon. I was in the kitchen, my back to the entrance, washing bottles after finally getting Leo down for a nap. The rush of water against stainless steel and the aggressive drumming of rain against the French windows isolated me from the world. Suddenly, the air pressure in the room dropped. I felt a density behind me, a magnetic pull that made the fine hairs on the back of my neck stand at attention. I didn't have to turn around to know it was him. He approached from behind, stopping so close that the heat radiating from his chest penetrated my uniform and scorched my skin. He smelled of expensive scotch, cedar wood, and a cologne that screamed, danger. I held my breath, my hands encased in soapy foam freezing over the glass bottle. It was in that instant, paralyzed by the shock of his proximity, that I felt the unmistakable pressure of his body against mine. It wasn't an accidental brush in a crowded hallway. I felt the hardness of his desire against my lower back, a physical declaration of everything his eyes had been shouting in silence for days. An uncontrollable tremor seized my hands. The bottle slipped from my fingers and clattered against the metal sink, but the noise sounded miles away. My mind went into shock. I tried to maintain composure, to pretend nothing was happening, but it was impossible to ignore the reality of his anatomy pressing against my hips. He said nothing at first. He just stood there, leaning into me slightly, as if he were measuring my resistance, testing the structural integrity of my morality. I knew I should step away, run out the service door, scream, or invoke my boyfriend's name, but my feet felt like they were cast in concrete. It was as if my body was fighting a civil war, rational fear versus a primitive, unknown yearning to see how this perverse game would end. With my heart battering against my ribcage like a war drum and my breath coming in shallow gasps, I summoned every ounce of willpower I possessed to turn off the faucet, pivot on my heel, and face him. We were nose to chest. He was tall, imposing. My voice came out trembling, a thin thread of sound, but sincere in its desperation. I told him, almost begging, that I was a good girl, that I had a serious commitment to Ethan, and that my dream, the entire architecture of my future, relied on walking down the aisle a virgin. I confessed, with cheeks burning in humiliation, that no one had ever touched me that way, and that I intended to save that gift for my wedding night. Julian looked at me. There was no guilt in his eyes, no flicker of remorse, only a crooked, almost ironic smile dancing at the corner of his mouth. With a calm voice, the voice of a man who controls boardrooms and outcomes, he told me he understood perfectly. But then, he took one step closer, pinning me against the granite countertop. "I understand, Hannah," he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like a delicious sin. "But you don't have to be afraid." He lowered his voice to an intimate confidence, confessing that his marriage to Eleanor was a cold facade. He told me she rejected him, that they had been sleeping in separate wings of the estate for months, and that he was going mad with need. He assured me that no one, absolutely no one, would ever have to know what happened within these four walls. I shook my head, insisting I couldn't, that my loyalty to Ethan was ironclad. But deep down, I felt the foundations of my resistance beginning to fracture when he leaned in and whispered something I had never considered, a loophole I hadn't seen coming. "There are ways, Hannah, ways to have you, to make you mine, where you remain technically pure, ways where you don't break your promise." His words landed on me like a forbidden revelation. He moved closer still, letting his gravelly, deep voice caress my ear, sending shockwaves through my nervous system. He painted a scenario where we could exist in a secret passion, without risks, without proof that my boyfriend could ever discover. His arguments were a perfect logical trap for a naive mind, looking for an excuse to yield. "We can do this in a way that leaves you intact for your wedding," he insisted, his nose grazing my earlobe. "Your physical integrity wouldn't change. Ethan would still receive the virgin bride he expects." Those words echoed in my head, scrambling my moral compass. I knew it was sophistry, a convenient lie, but I no longer had arguments against the heat he was kindling in my belly. I often wonder, looking back, would anyone in my situation, with that level of inexperience and that kind of pressure, have resisted to the end? Or is curiosity always stronger than virtue? He watched me with the gaze of a wolf that knows the lamb has stopped running. He brought his lips to my ear and was explicit, with a clinical calmness that was somehow charged with eroticism. He explained that if it was just with my mouth, or other paths that didn't involve technical consummation, nothing would change for my honeymoon. "Purity is a state of mind," he whispered. "It's a technicality." My knees went weak hearing that. I had no answer. I had no defense because, in the darkest corner of my being, those words fanned the flames of my curiosity. My heart screamed, "Sin," but my body reacted with tremors, with heat, dampening at the promise of something I had never experienced. He smiled, certain he had planted the fatal doubt. In that moment, I realized the line between innocence and desire was already dangerously blurred, almost invisible. My voice barely worked when I tried, for the last time, to say this wasn't right. He looked at me as if he already held the certainty of my surrender, and perhaps he was right. "I'm scared," I finally confessed, in a whisper that barely broke the silence of the kitchen. "Scared of losing control, of giving myself to something I've never known." Julian smiled with a feigned tenderness, running his large, warm hand smoothly down my bare arm. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "You just have to let it happen. Let go." In that instant, my vulnerability was laid bare like an open wound. The idea of resisting vanished before the desire he was feeding. He moved in closer, eliminating any space for doubt or air. I felt his hand slide slowly around my waist, firm but delicate, possessive. My entire body broke out in gooseflesh. I should have pushed him away. I should have run out into the rain, but I stood paralyzed, wrapped in the intensity of that forbidden contact. When his warm breath grazed my neck, an involuntary sigh, almost a whimper, escaped my lips. I understood then that my resistance had crumbled. I was there, allowing a married man, my employer's husband, to explore my fragility. My conscience screamed error, but my skin begged for more. I yearned to uncover this mystery that kept the world spinning. From that moment on, I knew I had crossed the Rubicon. I was no longer just the efficient nanny. I was part of a shared secret. As the days passed, the tension in the house became unbearable. Every accidental brush in the hallway, every glance across the breakfast island was a spark falling into a powder keg, until that day arrived. Eleanor had left early for a critical deposition in the city. We were alone. Julian approached with an almost victorious smile, knowing the time for words had ended. I felt my body react even before I fully understood his intentions. His hand slid up my thigh, moving slowly, mapping every one of my reactions, claiming territory. I attempted a weak physical resistance, but every caress of his made my heart pump blood with fury, and my legs tremble with weakness. It was an intoxicating mixture of fear, religious guilt, and a ravenous desire. He whispered dirty words in a low voice, promises of pleasure that made me shudder from head to toe. I was on the verge of caving, but the image of Ethan flickered briefly in my mind. However, when Leo finally fell asleep in his crib upstairs, I knew fate was sealed. Julian approached slowly. Every step he took was another beat in my tachycardia. His touch became bold. A shiver ran down my spine. My body no longer obeyed me. It obeyed him. It was forbidden, yes. Immoral, certainly. And yet I wanted it. He leaned in and pressed his body against mine, trapping me against the wall. Every caress explored my boundaries, blurring them. My breathing was chaotic. When his hands moved down from my waist to grip me firmly, the outside world ceased to exist. Only the two of us existed in that bubble of silence and sin. I was surrendered. Then, our lips met. It wasn't a sweet like kiss. Ethan's. It was a hungry, demanding kiss, a a kiss that tasted of treason and glory. It made my entire body shudder. I held my breath as his hands roamed my skin, awakening nerve endings I didn't even know I possessed. I wanted to resist. I wanted to be good, but I wanted to lose myself in that abyss so much more. Between kisses and whispers, I realized there was no turning back. After the kiss, a wave of liquid heat rushed through my veins. He began to explore my body with more intensity, fulfilling his promise to take me to the edge without crossing the final barrier I protected so fiercely. Julian's touch was expert. He knew exactly how to manipulate my anatomy to make me forget my vows. I was completely given over. The tension reached its fever pitch when he spun me around, holding me firmly. He whispered my name against my ear, and my final resistance shattered. I gave myself to the moment, allowing him to take what he wanted, always under that strange clause of preservation. The sensation of being so vulnerable, yet so desired, was a powerful drug. The climax of the tension between us exploded in a total surrender, albeit technically incomplete. Every caress, every gasp, every calculated movement of his took me to a place where morality did not exist. My heart felt like it wanted to leap out of my chest. I was exposed, used, but at the same time, I felt more alive, more of a woman than ever before. After that storm passed, semi-darkness stood there in the panting and silent. The only sound was our ragged breathing and the distant hum of the refrigerator. My body was still trembling, a mixture of residual pleasure and the crushing weight of guilt beginning to settle. But there was also a strange sense of power. For the first time, I understood the power of my own sexuality. I had crossed a line I never imagined, but looking him in the eyes, I understood that this experience had irreversibly transformed me. Julian took my hand, looking at me with an intensity that no longer frightened me, but made me an accomplice. A comfortable, heavy, secret silence installed itself between us. I knew something larger had happened there. It wasn't just physical. I had discovered a facet of myself that Ethan, in his innocent goodness, could never awaken. The last few minutes together before Eleanor's car pulled into the driveway were filled with a silence charged with meaning. Little Leo slept upstairs, oblivious to the betrayal, floating in the air. I felt divided, fractured between the good girl I was and the woman who had just been born in the arms of a forbidden man. I knew that secret would accompany me to the altar, an invisible stain on my white dress. I learned about my limits, about the hypocrisy of desire, and about how easy it is to fall when someone knows exactly what words to whisper. And in that moment, I understood there was a dark connection there, something that would mark me forever, a secret scar on the soul. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying until the end of this confession. It has been difficult to put this into words. I hope this story resonated with you, or at least made you question the boundaries of fidelity and desire. If you liked it, please, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It is the best way to support our work. I would also really love to know where you are watching us from. Are you from the UK, the US, Canada, Australia? Leave it in the comments. I love seeing how international our community is. And one more thing, leave your age in the comments, just so I know who is listening and to get to know you better. Subscribe for more real moving stories like this one. Sending you a big hug full of love. Until next time, goodbye.